quickly moving from the big data economy towards the insight economy. In the midst of this massive transformation, what will your role be? What are you doing to prepare for that? Amongst the Fortune 500 companies, very few of them exploit the real value of big data. And from those who do, fewer are doing so at a strategic level. What is an insight? An insight is a piece of information beyond the obvious. It has a dual character. It has an innate information value, and it is also a knowledge creation catalyst. Insights represent the latent value of your data. The era of big data led to a state in which every organization is now able to collect every single piece of data related to its business, with the goal of extracting value from the data. However, in many cases, the results have been underwhelming in terms of the extracted business value. One characteristic amongst those companies who succeed in that endeavor is that they do not inundate their decision makers with data. Instead, they offer them insights. The World Economic Forum is publishing the list of the most in-demand skills for the world economy. And it is very telling that between 2015 and 2020, there were two skills that jumped several spots. One of them was creativity, and another one was creative thinking. Now, it is even more telling that there have been two new entrants in the list. One of them was emotional intelligence, and the other one, cognitive flexibility. These differences point to a shift in the way that we are going to work in the future. My assertion is that we are augmenting our capabilities with the aid of computational systems. So the responsibility of the humans is shifting from the mundane and repetitive work to actions that require cognitive flexibility, critical thinking, and creativity. The reason behind this shift is the confluence of three major forces, all of which have reached a critical point. The first major force is big data. The second is cloud computing. And the third is machine learning. Let's look at each one of these briefly, because they are all responsible for driving the economy of insights. Back in 2009, Google researchers published an article in Nature, a top scientific journal, and reported that they were able to track the spread of influenza in the United States to a degree that was better than CDC, the Center for Disease Control. The Google researchers showed that they were able to do that in a day, whereas CDC needed a week or more to do effectively the same thing. Google was faster because it was monitoring the outbreak by finding a correlation between people's queries online and whether they had flu symptoms. Not only was Google Flu Trends quick, accurate, and cheap, it was theory-free. Google's engineers didn't bother to develop a hypothesis about what search terms, flu symptoms or pharmacies near me or coughing, might be correlated with the spread of the disease itself. The Google team just took their top 50 million search terms and let the algorithms do the rest of the work. The Google Flu Trends case became a poster child of that hot new trend in business, technology, and science called big data. As with so many buzzwords, big data is a vague term, often thrown around by people who want to sell something. There are a lot of problems that traditional data management must deal with, for example, cleansing, structuring, enrichment, and so on, that they're not simply going away with the volume of big data. We'll get back to that later on. Unless you've been on an isolated island like Robinson Crusoe, you must have heard of the term cloud computing. Now, you must have heard of it, but maybe you don't know what it means. A couple of things are worth knowing about cloud computing. The first is the obvious. What is cloud computing? Well, the key characteristic, the key element of cloud computing is the treatment of computational infrastructure as code. The second thing that we need to know about cloud computing is that public infrastructures have reached a level of maturity, a breadth and depth of services that allows us to take a balanced approach between the size and volume of data that we need to process on one hand and the cost, the operating cost that's associated with that on the other hand. The third force that is converging and is moving us towards the insight economy is artificial intelligence and machine learning. You must have heard of that because in the past few years there has been an uptick in how many times these words are mentioned in the headlines. There have been many companies that provide today in the cloud services that offer these capabilities to everyone. You don't need anymore to be a specialist in the field in order to apply some of these capabilities for your own purpose. So this is a very powerful capability that allows a system to learn by the data that it processes. It's something that we never had before because in earlier incarnations of artificial intelligence and machine learning, we needed to put the answer from the back door. We needed to know what the machine needs to know in order to program it. And that is a fundamental change in the way that we process data and the results that we can get by processing big data in particular. We've seen all the three forces that affect our move towards the insight economy. But what I'd like to suggest is that we view that transition from the lens of the manufacturing supply chain. Manufacturing supply chain, you may wonder, what does that have to do with the insight economy? And yet, if you think about it, everything that we have today, the laptop that you hold in your hands, the video camera that's recording us right now, everything has gone through a process of procuring raw materials to second-tier suppliers, to aggregators, to a plant that constructed the product, and later on to a distribution center, to warehouses, finally to reach the retailer where that product is consumed by the consumer. The same thing now is going to happen with information. The big data, which is on the left-hand side of that supply chain, is going to reach the consumer in the right-hand side, but it's going to be in the form of an insight. Show that slide again, but now call it the knowledge supply chain. And as you can tell, this requires a number of stages for the information that is in the big data to be transformed into an insight that will be delivered to the end consumer. So first of all, we have the tier of information acquisition. This is where you have your typical big data lake or any other form of aggregation of data from your company. The next stage of this supply chain is the analysis, the synthesis, the enrichment, the structuring of that data, so that we are able to put them all together in the next stage in an integrated form onto something that resembles a knowledge graph or some other form of knowledge structure that is amenable to manipulation, evaluation, and later on consumption. So the third part is integration, the fourth part is evaluation. What part of that knowledge is the area of knowledge that we want to focus in order to extract insights? That will take us to the next stage, which is a model selection. And as you can tell, the reason that the supply chain model is so apt for this purpose is that you fan out now from the concentrated knowledge into the many different ways that that knowledge can find an application. A person in marketing may leverage knowledge differently than a person in a legal department. A person in an R&D department may process the same knowledge in a very different way. All that leads to a tier of model selection that will be specific to the purpose of the use of the knowledge in that area. And therefore, finally reaching the end user, the consumer of that product, which is the distillation of knowledge and therefore an insight. So to summarize, advances made during the big data era are great, but are not sufficient for the knowledge era. In the knowledge era, these big data need to be leveraged through machine learning, and knowledge needs to be extracted from it and be injected into the various workflows of any business. What we talked about today is applicable to any industry. So those who will be able to do so will be leaders in their fields, and those who won't will be the laggards. I hope we all take the lesson and move on accordingly. Thank you.